Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Oroco's second town hall of 2025, and perhaps a second town hall in our existence. We're in the Vancouver offices, of course, for Oroco. Um, just so we all know who's speaking to you today. My name is Craig DL. I'm the chairman of Oroco. On my right is Michael Leahy, who is the Swiss Army knife, I think, in the organization, and is designated as the head of marketing. And on my left, your right, of course, is the company president, Ian Graham. Um, I'd like to start today by once more essentially congratulating Faisal Rodriguez on his wise choice to join Oroco's board of directors and the wisdom of the board of directors to pursue his appointment. Um, we can get into exactly who Faisal is later. I think anybody that's seen the news release that went out this morning should have a reasonably clear understanding of how significant an individual Faisal happens to be. And I will expound later on as to the degree of support that we anticipate he will be able to give us in terms of dealing with a very complicated but negotiable Mexican regulatory environment. Um, so we'll start with generally our list of those issues or items that we feel that you may want to hear from us about. And I'll start with one of the subjects that I think has been quite conspicuously stated by a number of shareholders with respect to the fact that Richard Locke is very often and almost often, most often, not present in these shareholder meeting environments. Um, the fact is that Richard was hired 3 years ago, essentially for one purpose, and that was to guide the development of Santo Tomas through to the point of the project's sale to a suitable major mining entity. The fact is that Richard has proven himself to be very, very capable in that regard. We have no issues with respect to the performance that he's demonstrated throughout his role with the company. And he was made CEO for a simple reason. He needed that authority in order to take full command of the project. Because essentially at that point in time, Oroco's full focus was the development of Santo Tomas. So, it still does not explain why, as CEO, he's not visible in some of these shareholder gatherings. And I can tell you quite simply, from my perspective with Richard, he is purely fact-based and he does not like to engage in speculation. And so often these shareholder meetings want to, one way or another, extract speculative timelines, etc., which Richard is just not inclined to do. He's factually inclined. He's not promotional. He does not speculate. He just deals with the facts. And so, in order to maintain essentially his core role in the company, he's not being asked to involve himself in these sorts of circumstances. But of course, he's available all the time through the processes associated with M&A activities and any strategic investment discussions that require his technical perspective. He's always there. And so I hope you people can start to understand just the true nature of Richard's involvement. It's not a comment in any way as to his perspectives on the company. I think he's still very much committed to seeing this project through. But I respect him most certainly for the fact that he just does not want to engage in circumstances which can become somewhat promotional or as I said, speculative. And I respect him for that. Um, so to get back to that which we're pursuing today and have been on an ongoing basis, and that this relates quite specifically to the engagement of or the appointment of Faisal Rodriguez. We for some time have been cultivating a series of relationships associated with primarily the political processes and the decision makers to a degree in that respect in Mexico with regard to the advancement of projects like Santo Tomas, which we all know to be a highly sensitive subject in the sense that our development objectives clash directly with the policies and intentions of the previous administration in Mexico, that of the presidency of Mr. Obrador. The bottom line is there was a very serious and impactful disdain or dislike for open pit mining practices, take a position taken by Mr. Obrador and echoed throughout his administration. This was thought to carry over to the administration of Ms. Sheinbaum. But what we have come to understand is that a statement that she made last fall as to the fact that there would be in the context of the development of Mexican projects, industrial projects, that there would be one-off scenarios that would be approved, provided that those circumstances related in a positive way to in both an environmental and in a social circumstance. And that is proven to be the fact in the sense that we've now been included in Plan Sinaloa formally. And to understand what Plan Sinaloa is, it is a subset of Plan Mexico. The president and her administration have set up 14 economic hubs throughout Mexico, one of which is centered around Topolobampo, which is the port from which Santo Tomas would essentially would export its concentrate, and within that economic hub at Topolobampo, we understand that there were initially 7 projects that were identified within the context of Plan Sinaloa, and we understand recently that grouping of prospective projects may have been reduced to 4. And we remain one of those projects, one of 4. So for those that have questioned as to what happened to the registry scenario that was put forth to us in April as a part of our meetings with the Ministry of the Economy, we understand that although there has not been any formal notification publicly, we understand that registry process and the support that was essentially stated to go along with an inclusion in the registry has essentially been fragmented or delivered out from a point of responsibility to each of the economic hubs, such that Plan Sinaloa is now effectively the subset of the registry process discussed with us in April of 2025. So I hope people can understand just how simple that is in terms of what transpired with respect to the registry. They essentially subdivided responsibility out to the regional hubs. From a financing perspective, there's been much concern about the lack of financing in Oroco over the past year or more. We're very aware of those concerns. we have to recognize, and hopefully our shareholders can begin to fully recognize the significance of the situation we are in over the last year and a half, or perhaps 2 years now, wherein we were trapped in a regulatory environment that was not conducive to the advancement of projects like Santo Tomas. And as a matter of fact, I was personally advised by a senior lawyer that is considered one of the top mining lawyers in the country in August of last year that we should essentially shelve for 3 years the Santo Tomas project, because he was so concerned as to the regulatory environment that existed at the time and how it was thought to be carried forward within the Sheinbaum administration, which of course I've addressed earlier, became somewhat well, significantly less of a concern. But 1 year ago, that concern did exist, and it was understood to exist throughout the investment community worldwide. And as it stands today, there are still many entities that would normally be involved in financing projects like Santo Tomas that just aren't interested in participating in the financing of a Mexican project. Full stop. So while the environment is changing, it's going to take, still obviously some time to see that change understood and fully recognized within the overall global investment community. There's always the possibility, of course, that for other reasons, many of these entities never do restore faith in the Mexican investment environment. But the bottom line is there is a trend now that we're starting to see more and more entities are wanting to discuss Santo Tomas in a very practical manner that obviously will lead to their interest transitioning into either an acquisition or something of that nature. In other words, some form of formal interest participation in the project. Not to say any of it will happen, but there's much more discussion now occurring to that effect. In regard to our financings to date, one of there's two circumstances that I'd like to quickly address. Number one, the February financing that we did, it was nominal. Sorry, it was essential because of our financial situation. It was utilized purely to allow us to keep ourselves operating to a limited degree in Mexico on site, etc. We were undertaking certain investigative activities, for example, with respect to Vinea, which we ultimately acquired. And there were certain ancillary aspects to the Santo Tomas project that allowed us to address beyond a drill program. So those funds, as limited as they were necessary at the time. And then in May, there was a circumstance where an investor came to us indirectly through a Canadian brokerage firm that had worked with us on a number of occasions previously. Out of respect for that entity and what they'd done for us previously, I thought that we should listen to the proposal that was given to us. Of course, we were at a time where funding was thought to be essentially necessary. And so I begrudgingly accepted a proposal that we go forward with half the financing that was proposed. And yet this was under circumstance where the nature of this investor was made very clear to us. And at the last minute, I became aware of who the investor was, and I wasn't confident as to their long-term intentions, which was suggested to be otherwise. And so I canceled the financing. A very simple and straightforward circumstance, which I think any reasonable individual would have done as I did. So we're now in a circumstance where, of course, where we will require more financing going forward, but this is the current plan that exists today. Faisal Rodriguez and certain associates of his will be participating in a financing that we've structured specifically for individuals that are active in one noteworthy way or other in Mexico. Such individuals, we determine, will be of assistance in moving this project forward in one way or another. That, excuse me, that financing will be exclusive to those individuals. It won't be overly significant in size. We anticipate it to be somewhere in the range of $2 to $3 million US, but it's sufficient to give us enough runway to work ourselves into the fall, during which time we expect to conclude a financing with Canaccord Genuity, who have been pushing us for some time now with an eagerness that involves them expressing an interest in funding all that which is necessary to complete a preliminary feasibility study for the project. Now, do we want to be doing that today at these price levels? I don't think so. I don't think there's a person out here that wants to do it unless they were concerned that that financing couldn't materialize at a slightly later date or at hopefully a higher price. I've asked Canaccord for the time for us to allow our market to represent who we think and what we think it should represent in terms of a closer approximation to the value of Santo Tomas and what we honestly believe this project can deliver to the shareholders in due course. And Canaccord has agreed to step back and allow us time to work our market in whatever form that we're able to, up to a level that at least gives us a more comfortable financing level that doesn't involve dilution that, from my perspective, and I think the perspective of everybody involved with the company, would be outlandishly excessive. We are going to do everything we can over the next 4 to 5 weeks to avoid that. As to strategic developments and where we're going, besides the setting the parameters of the PFS financing, our current objectives from a corporate development perspective relate to 3 areas. The first one is what was announced several months ago as our intention to explore the possibilities associated with expanding our mine plan into the riverbed of the Fuerte River, the seasonal reservoir, so to speak. After basically consulting with Faisal and others, we are confident that can be addressed in due course. And so we're going to continue to pursue that avenue of mine expansion into an additional area of the resource that we know has economic viability. The second area that we're pursuing is of course Vaiania, and in short order, I'm going to ask him to describe why we find Vaiania so prospective, and possibly he will address the string of pearls scenario, which we associate with Baharachi, Santo Tomas, and Vania as potentially 3 separate deposits, all of which we would like to position ourselves as to be able to access, which brings up the third. And the third is we are now back in discussion with Jinjuan with respect to Baharachi. Baharachi, if people aren't aware of what it constitutes, it's a deposit that has been verified by way of, I think they have a feasibility study actually done on the project that offers in excess of 250 million tons of 0.42 copper grade ore. it is essentially because of the nature of the location and the fact that it's not large enough by way of overall volume to justify the scale of production that would be necessary to make it economical. It is considered to be a stranded asset. Logically and practically, there is only one way for Xinjiang to see Baharachi materialize as an economic unit unless they are able to make a deal with whoever builds and operates Santo Tomas. We are finally back in discussion with Xinjiang because of those facts. After 6 years of occasional back and forth, but basically no interest in discussion. But now they are. And we see that as one of our significant potential steps forward in terms of the overall development of what will therefore become a mineral district, not just a project at Santo Tomas, but hopefully a district. I can stop there and allow our shareholder group to start to challenge us with their thoughts on how we could do a better job.
We have a first
So, yeah, Charles is suggesting that we do need to be somewhat speculative with respect to timelines to assist shareholders with anticipating the return on their investments, velocity of the capital.
But okay, let me address Charles. We're not saying that we won't provide those speculative timelines, etc. Just Richard won't. That's as simple as that is. It's not a corporate perspective. It's Richard's personal perspective. We'll provide those timelines. I'll give you one right now. I do believe that we are capable of finishing the PFS by the end of 2026.
Andre, I'm gonna allow him to talk. Andre?
What is the
Andre, are you able
Okay,
to speak to us?
Here's one, and I'll address this other one. What is the ideal share price that you would be looking for to execute a financing with Canaccord? The ideal share price is the highest price that we can justify in a scenario whereby they have their interest to address and protect, and we have ours. And ultimately, time will be a factor. We can't expect to delay this forever. But the bottom line is, at some point, it would be in our overall interest corporately to close a financing, at least sufficient to initiate the phase 2 drill program at Santo Tomas. So no specific target in mind, just simply as high and as reasonable a price as we can justify.
Andre?
You're muted, Andre. Are you able to unmute his mic, Michael?
No. Okay, we've got another question.
So that's Charles again.
Charles, I think we can expect, and let's just I don't like to do this, but I'm gonna quote the managing director of Canaccord. He told us to fully expect that the suitors that we're seeking are going to begin to materialize as we get towards the end of the PFS process. And that's the best statement I can give you by somebody who sits quite objectively outside of the company as a third party, who I believe from his considerable experience, is making that statement with a quite reasonable assumption.
Question from Timothy.
No, we have not received any offers other than those that existed very early on when Grupo Mexico made a series of informal overtures, essentially before we started to drill the project.
Peter Epstein.
Uh, I don't really want to try and comment on what major copper producers, I'm sorry, Peter, that what they may be thinking. I think we all have to be aware of the fact that there's a significant overall global demand for copper that is increasing faster than the ability to produce a sufficient copper to meet that demand. Where that demand spills to, I would imagine they're going to look to Mexico, obviously, amongst any other source.
Etienne.
Would the next financing be exclusive to Canaccord? No, we would be allowed to create our own president's list, so to speak, which would then involve shareholders that had come to us through Oroco, obviously. What is the current status of Baharachi? Uh, yeah, I think Xinjiang tried to make a deal with Sierra Metals. It didn't go anywhere. That was a few years ago.
Okay, if you could read the question beforehand.
I'm being coached here by Mike, who's much better at this than I am. So the question is, could you add some color or background how the contact with Faisal came about? And I want to do this. Thank you for this question, Malti. Between Mario's involvement and now Faisal, it seems that Santo Tomas is becoming more well known in Mexico. Much of the credit for both the involvement of Mario Zamora and Faisal Rodriguez is the direct result of work being done behind the scenes by Ubaldo Treviso, our minority partner, a project partner in Mexico. Ubaldo's help has been phenomenal. And I have to say at this time that this project would likely not exist were it not for the contributions that Ubaldo Treviso has made to the project. And what he does to ensure that the federal recognition of the culture within Oroco that's being so is become so important to essentially the inclusion of this project in Plan Sinaloa. It relates specifically to how we have interacted with the community, and that those initiatives, outside a few that we've taken from here, but for the most part, they have been generated by Ubaldo Treviso. He's done yeoman's work in this regard, and we will never ever be able to satisfactorily express our not only our satisfaction with him as a minority partner, but the thanks that we have for what he has done for this company.
Yeah, if I may, Craig.
And Ian can comment
Yeah,
as well.
informally, I met Mario and Faisal, I think initially both back in 2022, and
Through Ubaldo.
and through Ubaldo, and when they were Faisal back home visiting Choix, which is where he's from, and Mario when he was in the district doing his political work. So Ubaldo keeps a low profile but informal relationship with almost everybody who could be of significance in the region. And of course, he's engaged all the time with everyone in the community from He knows most of the kids, in the small communities in Choiks, and pretty much everybody knows Don Ubaldo and feel that he's approachable and they can walk up and talk to him. So he really is how it comes about that we are part of the fabric of Choiks and the environs, and largely as a result of him and his influence there is what enabled Linda and I to relocate to Choiks in 2021 at the height of COVID.
Next question is from Peter. Although some retail investors might still be concerned about the open pit issue, are your largest shareholders and potential strategic investors comfortable with the situation on the ground, or are they still a bit worried? I'm going to address this in several parts. First off, I think many of the retail investors are still concerned, Peter. Generally because of the fact that they don't have a sufficient level of understanding. And it's not that they're not capable. It's just that much of this has been very, very difficult to convey because we didn't want to largely expose particular nuances relating to activities and political activity. I'll use that phrase, that was going on behind the scenes in support of the project. And so we didn't want to be openly optimistic about where we saw this all going. But I think that with Faisal joining us, we can now be quite open about the level of confidence that we have, because prior to this point in time, over the last 6 months, we were able to develop the political support at all levels necessary to see this project through, but that was at the political level and wasn't necessarily at the regulatory level. And that's where Faisal Rodriguez comes in. He is very adept and very experienced at dealing at that level. And that is that level is not the same as dealing politically. They're operating under other circumstances, other guidelines, and Faisal is very conscious of the difference between the political support that we've got and that which is required to work our way through and finesse our way through the regulatory process. Now, are your largest shareholders and potential strategic investors comfortable with the situation on the ground? I am the largest shareholder. I'm very confident. As far as the other largest shareholders, I would think most of them are, because they do something that a lot of our shareholders don't do. They actually ask us the questions directly. They don't speculate as to what the answer may be. They will actually call us up, or they'll write me an email, or Ian an email, or Mike, and they get an answer. And it's a very difficult thing to anticipate where the uncertainty resides, when in fact that uncertainty does not declare itself. Now, as to our strategic investors, I hope this is not misunderstood, but I honestly believe that our strategic investors are the people of Mexico. Now, that may sound somewhat fanciful, but the bottom line is what I've come to understand in initiating negotiations with local Mexican business people is that there's a completely different level of understanding of the significance of Santo Tomas. And there's also a completely different feeling about investing in something that they understand and can rationalize in terms of its value, without trying to connect themselves to some sort of securities structure that they have no knowledge or experience with. But in terms of understanding what Santo Tomas represents, not only in terms of a mining opportunity, but in terms of what it means to the people of that particular region, that generates significant interest. And I can tell you that Mario Zamora's marketing team has volunteered, and we're going to put together, we've already created a basic framework under which they can start to market this project nationwide in Mexico, and it will be marketed essentially as the investment opportunity that it happens to be. The aspect of all this that we have yet to identify very specifically is how we will fold that interest into actual participation in the ownership of Oroco. And that we already have our lawyers working on. Can I say what that solution will be ultimately? Not yet, not today. But you just so that everybody knows we're working towards that. Because on that basis, we can market this project under a circumstance where what we're selling relates quite specifically to the overall value of the project. Doesn't relate to a market in Canada that they do not understand. And apparently Canadian investors and international investors don't seem to quite understand either. So the bottom line is, I go back to what I said earlier. I believe in time what's going to prove out to be our strategic investment group will be the people of Mexico. I firmly believe that.
We were asked to read the questions.
Well, I did
as
read that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. So Charles.
Charles, could you set a goal date we can measure your performance against? If you are wrong, adjust. The share price would then have a reason to properly value the property. If you are going to take 20 years to finish, you have no value today. If you have 2 or 3 year timeline, you have a value, and we shareholders have a reason to invest now before the share price goes up. Correct. I will say this though, Charles. If you are wrong, yes, we always have to adjust. I think we've been wrong several times already, and here we are. This is part of our adjustment process. The bottom line is that we have a timeline. I've actually even mentioned it earlier on in terms of, I've cited 2 circumstances. Number one, I do believe that we can have the PFS completed by the end of 2026, the latest in the first quarter of 2027. Canaccord, the managing director of corporate finance at Canaccord, has said we can fully expect to have suitors engaged by the end of that process. Now, I can't go any further than that in trying to, and I won't go any further than that in trying to speculate as to what that therefore represents in terms of the timeline to a sale price. But I'll tell you this much, it isn't 20 years. It's much, much sooner.
Timothy.
How much money needs to be raised to complete the PFS, including drilling, etc.? Our current estimate is 25 million Canadian in order to carry the company in all respects, administratively and otherwise, cost of maintaining the concessions, etc. It takes the number to generally 30 million Canadian. Charles again. We see milestone after milestone achieved, but we have no timeline to measure your performance against. Well, I just
Yeah, I think that was asked before you addressed the.
With the $2 to $3 million investment from Mexican strategic investors be enough to allow Oroco to be listed in Mexico. We've been advised against listing on the Bolsa. It is not thought to be of great advantage. We're looking at another way of accessing that investment interest. Torex is acquiring Prime Mining, which I think has a primary open pit mine plan expectation. Well, that's ours as well. That's what we understand. But it is a gold project, which is consistent with Torex's overall mandate. I can't tell you much more about Prime Mining other than what has been disclosed publicly. But it was interesting with respect to the security question that many people want to ask, and that is doing business in Sinaloa. And Prime Mining is located in the center of the southern area of Sinaloa, where there's known to be many more problems from a security perspective than we have at Choice. You need to understand, hopefully, that the Choice area, the Choice region, the Choice municipality is very stable in that regard. There is no cartel activity of any note at all.
That's correct.
I mean, Ian lived there for 2 years, and he can tell you specifically what his experience was. We don't foresee any safety issues whatsoever with respect to the operation of a copper mine. It's not like we're moving gold dory bars or anything of that nature. It isn't in the scope of reason. And I'll go further. The governor of Sinaloa, very powerful man, supported by people that otherwise may be thought to be of concern in a subject like this. He is overtly supportive of this project because, generally speaking, the people and the politicians of Sinaloa recognize that Santo Tomas may be the only hope, the only practical hope for meaningful economic development in that particular region. And that is significant.
No.
You mentioned a 4 to 5 week time frame to see the share price rise to a reasonable level for further financing. What levels do you possess? What levers do you possess to cause the share price to significantly rise during this period? One of them is, I think once the international investment community starts to realize that the Mexicans that are in the know, actually in the know, are in the political process, are in the business process, are in the regulatory process, know that this project is going to come to fruition, that they are investing, I think that's going to be one of them. Otherwise, we're implementing a marketing plan that's going to be much more substantial than anything we've seen prior to this point in time. And we're going to continue to do more of these town halls, etc., over the next few weeks so that we can keep the message being conveyed to the investment community. Randall is asking, when will current Whittle study be complete and released?
Yep, I can address that. So making good progress there and making some discoveries that were perhaps not anticipated around recoveries, around how we might calibrate the selective mining units in a PFS. Recall that what we're trying to do here in this strategic optimization study is find the levers for improving the outcomes of the PFS and helping zero in the scope of the PFS. We expected to be done in late October. I think we're going to find a slight delay because some of the discoveries so far in the process are going to require us to do a few small work programs that were not in the original scope with Whittle. So I would imagine we're running into November. Personally, I'm really excited about the things we're learning inside that study. Be aware that the entire study can't be released. It's not a 43-101 type study. It's a study for internal consumption to properly build and calibrate the PFS study technically. So several trade-offs, etc., going on. But we do look forward to being able to give a high-level view of what is derived from the study. But internally, we're thrilled, and that has been something that through the summer was ongoing, and the weekly engagements and data back and forth with Whittle have been very active, a lot of fun, and really quite productive. So thanks for asking that question because, it's under the hood somewhat, but we've made some real progress there.
So the next question comes from my old friend Quinn Hughes. Nice to talk to you again, Quinn. His question is, how are you cutting costs? Now, excuse me, before I go to that, I want to talk about where we were in this company 1 year ago. With copper prices at less than 85% of where they are today. In other words, there's been a 15% increase in copper prices since where they were 1 year ago. We have obviously seen an appreciation in certain areas that have yet to be measured. And I think part of what Whittle's doing is they're providing some of that additional measurement. But what I want to focus on is the fact that we have been, I believe, very diligent in minimizing costs throughout that period. And as a matter of fact, the cost to the shareholders of the delays that have occurred, and please keep in mind, primarily the result of the regulatory issues with respect to our operational opportunity in Mexico. But during that period of uncertainty, wherein we had to be very careful with our costs, quite obviously, the cost to the shareholders of Oroco was a dilution factor of 4.4%. That's it. 4.4%. And I can tell you unequivocally, the project has increased in value many times that since. So I just ask everybody to keep that in mind while you're throwing your fruit and vegetables at us in terms of our lack of progress in the market. But the bottom line is, from a cost-cutting perspective, Quinn, to be specific with your question, Richard hasn't been paid since back at the very beginning of 2025. I have drawn a total of 4,500 Canadian dollars this year. Everybody in the senior position has taken a substantial pay cut, and of course, we've cut ourselves to the bone in Mexico. We still have, I believe, 14 or 15 employees,
Yeah.
which are essential to some of the day-to-day activities that we maintain.
Yeah, may I say one area we have not cut costs is our community engagement in Choiks.
True.
The value of that investment has already returned to us in a very significant way. In the end, what has engaged the political support we've found is literally a series of videos illustrating our community engagement, the fact that it continues, and the fact that the last line of sort of reduction to zero, in other words, maintaining that modest level of employment in Choiks, entirely has given us the credibility from which the political support derived. So whilst we have cut substantially, I think we've continued to invest where the value is. And I'm very, very proud that we've maintained that commitment to the place I formerly lived and very much value the town of Choiks and the surroundings. So I'm proud of the fact we didn't just go to zero, despite the challenges.
And on that subject of personal compensation, I also want to add, some people have speculated that I took advantage of our depressed market back in February and acquired a bunch of shares, which people felt was unfair and unreasonable. Fact is, I didn't acquire one share. I did a share swap with the incoming investors, and which ended up being a net zero transaction for me. In other words, I took my free trading shares and sold them to individuals who then purchased from me, of course, and paid for those shares, which I then took and invested in the company so as to ensure that those dollars, every one of them, went into the company. And I ended up essentially taking back from the company lettered shares, in other words, restricted shares, in return for my free trading shares, which I sold into the market to support the company.
And
So-
I would add to that, the warrants also transferred
Everything.
to the external investor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just further to how are you cutting costs, Quinn? And that question relates to, of course, compensation in every way, shape, and form. So next question from Ray Zeal. Is Oroco seeking investors from jurisdictions outside North America, i.e. Europe and Australasia? We'll accept investment from everywhere. What we're trying to avoid, though, right now is formulating a financing at levels that are obviously going to relate to our current share price. And that's the enigma.
Has Faisal visited the project? The answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's
He's
been
from-
up there
he's from there.
historically, and he has visited recently. He's been up on the ridge several times over the last number of years.
From Multi, can you speak more about Viania? The reason behind the acquisition, plans to poke a few holes? How does it connect to ST geologically? Here we go.
Yeah, so I'll refer back to Craig's original comments. Porphyry coppers tend to occur in districts. There's usually multiple expressions of the intrusive activity. So at Santo Tomas, in the Santo Tomas district, we see Baharachi. We expect roughly equidistant as Baharachi is from Santo Tomas. There would potentially be other copper intrusive expressions, and we see evidence of that down at Vinia. That evidence is somewhat indirect. We know there are intrusive monzonites there, very similar to what we see at Santo Tomas. And then we see the secondary deposits, the skarns, the breccias, and other evidence, usually higher in the system of mineralization associated with porphyry coppers, down at Vinia. So we need to get in and understand where the center of intrusion might be. There's some evidence in historical magnetics that it is possibly between two of the known mineralization expressions, a silver-dominated precious metals system and an iron ore replacement system that has been mined at a modest scale historically. So we need to do some work, some exploration, a little bit of simple geophysics perhaps. And then, yes, Multi, once we can sort of locate where we want to test to begin to vector on the potential copper, we'll need to drill some holes. But yeah, there's some significant grades, particularly in replacement skarns, that suggest that there is an engine of mineralization at Vinia. Personally, I'm pretty excited about Vinia. Richard is unable, I guess, to extinguish the exploration geo in me. And so is Andrew Ware. And Andrew is perhaps, although he's a geologist, leans more to the objective engineering side of our business. So he's perhaps a transitional personality between myself and Richard. But he too is very excited around Vinia. And the young geologists who've been doing mapping over the last number of months are very, very pleased with what they're seeing. The breccia in the west part of the project is very extensive, very energetic, explosive breccia, which suggests that there's a reasonable size intrusion associated with Vinia. So exciting project. And could we find the sort of third pearl on the string? We're very hopeful that we can. So exciting project. And as Craig intimated, we're perhaps able to convert the Santo Tomas project and the play into a true district and regional play. We're thrilled about that. And I think that we have high potential to add significant value through that acquisition.
Quinn has asked the question, should we assume zero value for Bracili's zone? We're going to have disparate opinions on this one. I look at it this way. In practical terms, from a project valuation perspective, immediate to what we know about Santo Tomas, we don't need the Bracili zone to add to that economic unit, to the value of it. I'm concerned that what does exist there is at such a depth that the strip ratio would be too high to make any project on that side of the river viable. But that's just my opinion. I'm just an English, math, and common sense guy. Now we can talk to the geologist about this, and he still sees potential there. But I just want to emphasize that if you consider the Bracili zone, anything north of the southern parameter of the actual reservoir, the seasonal reservoir, then I would say yes, there is value to that, in the sense that there's certainly value in the southern half of the riverbed, because it's a simple extension ultimately of the North Pit to the north and towards the Bracili zone. So in that sense, there is value to the north of the North Zone.
I think that's fair. I mean, will we derive, if the question is, will we derive significant value from Brasiles? I agree with Craig. The answer's no, but is it a blue sky opportunity, an additional resource once mining operations are maturing? I'm absolutely convinced that that is the case.
Next one is from Joseph, who's clearly now my friend, because he says, "Good job, guys. I'll be buying more. Only note next time, go on the offensive." I thought we were already pretty offensive.
I should say speak for yourself, but yes, we are
Yes.
pretty offensive around
Randall
here.
and Quinn have the same question.
Yeah.
Any plans or opportunities to increase the interest in the project from 85.5% down the road? Most definitely. We have understandings with our minority partners, minority interest partners, that that can be achieved through the additional expenditures that we've actually already made. We also have a soft understanding with the Rodriguez family, but we just have to be in a position financially to make those acquisitions. And of course, Quinn has asked the same question essentially. So the bottom line is they're both at the forefront of our interest with respect to expanding the ownership overall of the project. Yes, and nothing has happened to change that.
Peter has his hand up.
Big thanks to another friend of mine, clearly, Randall. Big thanks to Oroco management. As a long-term shareholder, I don't think we could have a better leadership team in place. Well, I think we could be better, but that's just my personal view. I say that every day to the guys.
Well, no, and part of being thrilled to have Faisal join us is exactly that. I think we do need to deepen the team as we go into phase 2 and the feasibility studies end of the project, starting with the PFS. So yeah, I think we are deepening the DNA and the breadth of experience. So, but thank you for the comment.
Peter, I've asked you to unmute if you want to ask a question.
No, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
You couldn't have gone silent. The billboards are saying that you'd be raging all afternoon. Okay, let's try. While everybody's here, let me just try to describe a couple of other things.
There's a couple more.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Another friend, clearly. Always great to hear your updates, guys. Keep up the good work and congrats on Faisal. Yeah, we can't stress more in terms of how significant this individual is. By the way, on top of everything else, he's going to demonstrate his commitment to this project very soon when we announce the participants in the Mexican-based financing, which we hope to do certainly within the next 2 weeks. And I think you'll be quite impressed with the level of his commitment and the fact that this individual has come to us and said, "What can I do for you?" Which so rarely occurs in this business. People come to us and say, "What can you do for me?" And in this case, Faisal has legitimately said, "What can I do for you?" And not only that, he's going to help us do it financially. So it's a tremendous situation. What number of outstanding diluted shares should we think about at the end of the project? Be conservative. Conservative at PFS. I believe that we have to think in terms of 325 million. Best guess. Anybody else? Please. We're here to.
I think is there. Oh, you've got it.
Okay. Ian said during a July 3rd interview that the company is buoyed a bit by a royalty income. What was he?
The gold group.
Yeah, what was he referring to? That's the gold group scenario. One of the reasons we were able to extend our shelf life, so to speak, was in fact the holdings we had in Gold Group.
And the royalty had not they had delayed some payments, and so they were in catch up mode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't covered?
One more question from Quinn.
Would the Mexican government ever possibly invest in Santo Tomas? I don't believe so. I think that's unrealistic. I do believe, however, Quinn, that from what I've witnessed now, again, and I've stated this earlier, but I want to reiterate because I do believe it can be a very important factor here, and that is that when I say that I believe that the strategic partner in waiting, so to speak, for Oroco or for the project are the people of Mexico. I'm talking about the investment community within Mexico. And there is, I've witnessed it, and it's a different kind of stimulation for these people. And as I said, it's not a somewhat confusing request to participate in the investment of a company in a foreign land that they have no control over in any respect. In essence, what we're talking about is something that I would suggest today is almost like marketing a piece of the rock. And I'll use that age-old expression in that regard. We are looking at ways to shape that would be far less dilutive to Oroco shareholders. 325 million, Thomas, is what I'm saying, is what I believe is a reasonable expectation. What I can't factor into that number is the warrant package that may or may not exist as a part of that financing, and whether those warrants ever come into play. I believe that they likely will, if in fact there is a warrant package. They likely will come into play because I believe that we're going to see a result here within 2 years. Now, I know you've heard this 2-year number forever, but I don't think that we understood back when as the significance of the negative influences that existed with respect to projects like Santo Tomas in Mexico. And I truly believe that what we haven't overcome, we will overcome because we know now how to overcome those obstacles. Any more questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Excellent.
So I just like to say that I don't think any day goes by where we don't think about ways that we can improve the circumstances around Oroco, the shareholders, and what we can do to improve the overall investment opportunity for our shareholders. The bottom line is we have not really been in a position to do anything about those concerns for quite an extended period of time. We feel we're getting to that point now, hence the interest of people like Canaccord. But the bottom line is that's of course reflective of the fact that we are so undervalued, and the market is now heating up and becoming more accepting in a general sense of projects like Santo Tomas. But our market is yet to catch up with that optimism. And so we've got some work to do to get to a point where we suffer as little dilution as possible. I mean, I've used the example, said to the guys several times. There's a big difference between 28 million shares financed, or sorry, $25 million of financing at 25 cents a share and $25 million of financing at 35 cents a share. And the difference is $28 million of what I believe is unnecessary dilution. Now, 35 cents is not my limit either, but I'm just using that simple little example of the consequence of financing at these levels. And so, if nothing else, we won't be financing at these levels immediately to the tune of 25 million. One of the things that we've had Canaccord agree to is that they will do this in tranches so as to allow the market to build in between those tranches. So it's not just the time frame between now and the time this process starts with Canaccord, but we'll also have the time following as those initial monies are expended and people start to generate a greater level of confidence and enthusiasm in the outcome, that we could then subsequently finish the necessary financing in early 2026 at hopefully significantly higher prices. And we don't lose sight of the dilution factor ever.
A few more questions have rolled in. Charlotte.
Okay. Charles, I want to say I am pleased with the progress. Another friend. There has been quite a lot accomplished in the time I've been invested. The PEA established a baseline value, and the PFS will be instrumental in establishing the sale value. Absolutely correct, Charles. I will say I do agree with Charles on the progress that's being made. It's very, very difficult to convey an adequate representation of this of what's been accomplished in the last 6 months in terms of allowing this project to get back on the rails. People were clamoring for more drilling, more this, more that, none of which would have helped us move this project forward. And as a matter of fact, it may have put us in a position of greater jeopardy in the sense that we'd have more investment with no result. Because this is all about gaining acceptance of this project within the Mexican environmental and social parameters that the federal government has clearly established. And we're there. And that has taken a lot of work behind the scenes, just a lot of strategic thinking, and it's much of it has come from outside the company. People just advising us in terms of how basically to negotiate these uncertain waters. And so it's been a collective effort, and that effort's been there for good reason, because so many people that understand the process are supportive of our objectives. Do you have a timeline, Terry? Do you have a timeline on when you hope to launch on the Toronto Stock Exchange? Again, I'm not entirely certain as to when that may happen. Our corporate lawyers here, securities lawyers, have advised us against it. They don't see it as the same necessity that we do. It's under review. But at this point in time, we don't qualify. So that takes the discussion essentially off the table for now, Terry. Brazil. Is copper viewed as a strategic metal in Mexico? Is there a dialogue among Mexico's copper producers to lobby together for this subsector within Mexico? You know more than I do.
There is some discussion among the producers currently in Mexico. Brazil, you're quite sort of connected, I guess, with Mexican the political scene, and so there is. And at the recent Mexico Mining Forum, that was addressed. I don't think the lobby has really sort of bound together just yet and making big initiatives. But there's, I guess, the early indications that they're raising the profile of copper with the president.
So I'm almost reluctant to read Peter's next statement as so effusively supportive, and I feel guilty doing it, but I'll read it. Great story. To the extent your valuation is suppressed due to open pit fears, which seems very likely, true, then this is a tremendous buying opportunity. Absolutely true. I will be buying shares. Thanks for the detailed update. Well, thank you, Peter, for appreciating what we're trying to accomplish here and what I believe we are accomplishing. Wow, the copper future for this is Peter again. Wow, the copper futures price is now at 481 US a pound. All of a sudden, your PEA is based on US $4 a pound. The difference there, by the way, is really quite significant in terms of what it does for a which will happen eventually, a recalculated at net present value. Does it not? Yeah, I mean, it increases at a greater rate than that 20% increase in the spot price that I see here. Quinn, Gold Group recently raised a lot of funds to potentially invest in other mining projects. Have they spoken with you, especially given you already have a relationship? Well, we've spoken to them quite frequently. They seem to have a different target in mind, and they know that well, they've dealt with us for a while, and they may know that we're not that easily pushed over, so to speak. So yeah, they're going to do what they're doing, and I don't see that being involving us at all. Personally, I don't. Etienne, any progress on the permits you mentioned in the last town hall would get press release to generate interest. What we've received, which was, by the way, largely the work of Faisal Rodriguez a few weeks ago, was a letter from Semernet, the Regulatory Environment Agency, that basically stated we could complete our exploration project, the exploration phase of the development of Santo Tomas without any further permitting. So there are no permits to be obtained, Etienne. It was uncertain at the time as to whether we'd need any more immediately, and hence Faisal pursued a result on our behalf. But the bottom line is, it turned out we don't need any immediately, and there is no foreseeable obstruction to us proceeding in certain aspects of the permitting process when it's necessary to do so. Fair statement?
Yeah, that's correct. So
Yeah.
that we sort of tried to articulate that in the August 13th news release.
Your view, my personal view, probability, percentage figure that the project will get to the end successfully sold. If you don't want to answer that, I understand, but then I would like to have a chat with you one-to-one. Is it Turgov? My personal view. Here's how I look at things. There's a residual value, a current value that exists in that project today. And I'm just going to say this. I am absolutely confident that that number, that amount, the value of that project today in a fire sale mode is a multiple of our current share price. So, some of these people that have wished for us to basically go bankrupt, well, they may be wiser than most of the rest of us, in the sense that if they're a shareholder today and we had to sell that project, I would guarantee with my whole share position that sale price would be considerably higher than and would therefore be proceeds would be dispersed to the shareholders at an effective price level much higher than our current trading price.
I think to sort of answer, I think it's Trygve's question, there's a high probability that this project will transact, and that we'll get to the endpoint successfully. The buildability of this project, and that is calibrated by Richard, the engineers, Jim Noreen, who led the PEA and is on the call. That this is buildable, that the estimation of costs, etc., are reasonably easily accomplished. All of that is good. We're on the infrastructure, and we're in a mining environment with a workforce that will be employed and with ready skills locally, domestically. So I think very high probability, from my perspective, 95%. The second part of the question was, yeah,
He wants to have a chat with us, which is fine. We look forward to those one-on-one conversations.
yeah.
But I want to add one more thing. I look at these things, just my nature, from a defensive position. And what I'm always thinking about is what happens worst case scenario today. We've all heard the numbers associated with where this project may ultimately end up in terms of a buyout valuation. And those numbers are relatively stratospheric to where we are today. I prefer not to think about that. I just look at where we are today. And I think the shareholders need to look at where we are today. Because when we talk about the disconnect between our current share price and the value of the company, most often people are talking prospectively. And those numbers are 10 and 12 times from where we are at a trading level today. And to me, it's impractical to think that way. Where we have to basically focus for today is what the value of the project is today. Then we can focus on what that may become in time. But I think that the real security in this project today and the security in investing in it today is the value of this project today. An investor since 2018, I believe that you are doing a great job under extremely difficult circumstances. Thank you. Well, thank you, Bruno, for that support. I truly appreciate it, as do the guys, most definitely. Anonymous, Mr. Anonymous, can you speak a bit to how Santo Tomas costs and economic metrics are very similar to Hud Bay, which secured a major financing? This one you can handle, I think.
Sure. The investment by Mitsubishi into Hud Bay for Copper World development was $420 million for a 30% position in a project that I believe you're quite correct is comparable with Santo Tomas. Slightly shorter life, bit more strip up front, a few metrics.
We think we're better.
We think we're better. Clearly, they're in the US. There's some benefit to that. However, $420 million for 30% of the project. You can inflate that valuation to the 100% valuation, and there's another $180 million to follow as part of project build and financing without increasing the equity from above 30%. So I think, this values them well above $1 billion, approaching 1.3 to 1.8. And we think we have a comparable project. They have a PFS. We don't. And so, I think we'll see revaluation on two things, a PFS and a broader understanding that we're on a permittable track for development. Those, I think, are the two significant items that need to transition for us.
Okay, so here we go. This is the kind of question, by the way, that Richard Locke would run from. And I can understand absolutely why he would. The question is, just out of curiosity, if there was a fire sale, what would the price be? Well, I can tell you what mine is. And it relates to much of what has gone on in the area, what Xinjiang is looking for with respect to Baharachi, where they've put it up for sale at 200 million US, a project that is approximately 1/4 the size of Santo Tomas. But my number, for other reasons, is somewhere in the range of minimally 150 million and as high as 250 million. And I'm told by anybody that I've spoken to on this subject that I'm too conservative, that this project today in its current form would sell for more than that. But that's what, the question is fire sale, where we had to make a sale within a relatively limited period of time under pressure to sell it. And of course, the buyer would be aware of those pressures. But I think quite reasonably, and I feel with great certainty actually, that it would be a minimum of 150 million US and more likely in the 200 million range. Peter again, OCO is valued at 8 cents per copper equivalent pound.
No,
No, sorry, Peter. 0.8 of 1% per
Of 1
per
cent.
1 cent per copper equivalent pound in the ground. The mean value of peer projects is 3 cents per pound. In other words, almost 4 times greater. So OCO is at a 70% discount, in my opinion. Well, welcome to the club, Peter. Uh, what do you say? I mean, look, we made a number of mistakes over the years. It took too long for us to do the updated PEA. There was too much discussion about prospective strategic investors, and that piled on top of all the uncertainty in Mexico in basically two areas. One, the regulatory concerns, and number two, this Sinaloa hangover in terms of concern about security. Bottom line is there's we've reached a point at which we feel that we've been able to address all of those concerns. We've put behind us, and we have to put behind us the mistakes that we made internally. The bottom line is it really wouldn't have made that much difference to arrive at this point in time where the PEA had come in on time, and there hadn't been this discussion about strategic investment that never materialized, because the Mexican regulatory environment would not have allowed us to proceed. And so no matter how far we'd advanced Santo Tomas otherwise, it was still going nowhere. Now, the difference would have been this. Perhaps instead of starting at 25 cents a share, we'd be now having these conversations at some number maybe in the range of 50 cents a share. But unquestionably, in that time frame, one of two things could have happened. Either we reached a point where we started to push for the permitting required to advance the project beyond the PEA status, or PFS status, is what it turned out to be, and the project would have been terminated effectively by the regulatory environment. Fortunately, we didn't get that far. So now here we are in this somewhat serendipitous circumstance where, because of the delays, we're able to move this project forward without encumbrance, without resistance. So what's the difference? The difference is, as I said, a little bit, there would have been more optimism because of certain things being done a little better in the past, but we'd still be emerging from this regulatory uncertainty. So there we are. I mean, in some ways, this has been beneficial, these delays. And I just wish people would start to really understand that.
Yeah. No apparent
Are we
further
done?
questions. So yeah, looks like we are.
Listen, this has been a great opportunity. I'm glad, that we had that crystallizing event where Faisal joined us. I think we're going to have more of these opportunities in the near future. Again, the biggest challenge right now that I see is fending off unwarranted or unnecessary dilution. That is the theme of the day. And for all the individuals that were uncertain about the value of this investment, I hope this has helped to inform you as to why we feel so strongly that we are seriously undervalued. Clearly, the market is a detriment to our ability to go forward and in a manner which avoids a great degree of that unnecessary and unwarranted dilution. This is an appeal in some ways, not for any money, not for anything other than an expression of support in the market by those of you that have come to understand the significance of this opportunity and the minimization of the impediments to its outcome, to its prospective outcome. Compensation package for Mr. Faisal Rodriguez. He will obtain, by way of an outright purchase, a significant number of shares in the company. That's it. That's the deal. He fully expects the shares to appreciate so significantly, he hasn't asked us for anything. Nothing. I'm invested for the long term. I agree with regarding dilution, and well done. Well, thank you. It's, as I said, it's a conundrum. Paris, sounds like big and highly value added goals. Yes, they are, and they will be. Good luck. Sounds like you guys are highly confident on these next goals. Should be good for patient shareholders. Well, it's intended to be good for all shareholders. I mean, really. But I have to say, we do recognize the value of those that have supported us from the very beginning. And by the way, when the financing comes, financing opportunity, it will be still with respect to Canaccord. Any of those long-term supporters are welcome to participate by way of putting themselves on Oroco's president's list. So you know. How are we doing? How many people are online still?
63.
63.
Now, thank you all for your participation. 90 minutes is a chunk of time to invest, but we're thrilled you have.
Yeah, Ian didn't want to go any longer than 90 minutes. He said he'd need a bathroom break, and I said, well, I'll beat you to it. So I guess I guess if we've reached the end, let's consider this the beginning, because we're going to be doing this much more regularly. As I said or alluded to earlier, we'd like to be doing this when we've got something worthy to discuss. We've felt very strongly today that we did, for a number of reasons beyond the announcement today of Faisal joining us. And we see a number of things coming in the very near future to address Paris's question that, yes, we believe we can hang our hats on, and will be more than willing to discuss in this type of open forum. So one reminder, please, whatever issues you may have with how we're doing things, I don't think I personally, I don't think Ian or Mike have ever turned away from any form of argument or fight or opportunity to state our case, even in the most aggressive type of statement or approach by one of our shareholders. We are extremely open about our thought processes and our planning and our strategic thinking. So, please, everybody, just feel welcome to contact us. Please.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. I'll say it's been enjoyable. We like talking about this. It makes a lot of sense to us. I hope it makes as much sense to you.